Welcome back. So briefly on moldy foods. So we know many types of foods grow mold, like bread, cheese, and fruit. But under certain conditions, molds do produce toxin. We know that cooking and freezing stop mold growth, but don't destroy toxins already in the food. So if a food's moldy, best bet, discard it, clean the area where it was stored, and check neighboring foods to see if they contain mold and do the same with those. We do know that the mold Aspergillus flavus produces an aflatoxin, which is one of the most carcinogenic and mutagens known. The level of aflatoxin that may be present in foods in the U.S. is regulated, so we've never really had an outbreak of illness caused by this, but it is a big problem in developing countries. And this mold commonly grows on corn, rice, wheat, peanuts, almonds, walnuts, sunflower seeds, and spices. Where we see it a lot was the black pepper and coriander. And exposure to this aflatoxin can lead to liver cancer, and we know that many regions with high rates of liver cancer, as seen in this graph, also have high exposure to this aflatoxin. Parasites, you hear about this quite a bit, are organisms that live at the expense of others. Most are microscopic single-celled animals, but some are worms big enough to be seen with the naked eye. They're typically killed by thorough cooking. If raw fish is consumed, you put you at risk. So parasitic infections can be avoided by eating fish that has been frozen. You know, everyone wants never been frozen fish, but in certain incidents this can be a good thing because it kills the parasites. A common single-celled parasite is Giardia lamblia. We often refer to this as Giardia. You get it from drinking untreated water from streams or other sources, and the water's been contaminated with animal feces. We see it in daycare centers where diapers are changed and the hands and surfaces are not thoroughly being washed. Cryptosporidium parvum, that's commonly seen in contaminated water, raw fruits and vegetables. Multicellular parasites, these are typically worm-like organisms like trichinella. They cause flu-like symptoms, and we see that in undercooked pork and game meats. So if you eat a lot of game meats, you want to make sure they're cooked, and fish as well as common sources because they carry the larvae of roundworms, flatworms, flukes, and tapeworms. So here's a picture of a herring worm, kind of gross. Prions are pathogenic proteins that can cause degenerative brain diseases such as spongiform encephalopathies, and they're short for proteinaceous infectious particle. The BSE is like a mad cow disease, is something that you probably heard of. CJD, Creutzfeldt-Jakob Disease, and these pathogens, they're the scariest yet, and but they're not because they're not caused by microbes, but they're caused by a protein called a prion that has folded improperly. Remember, we talk about the folding of proteins in the protein chapter. And so that's the scary thing about these. Can cause some brain, eating of the brain, nervous tissue, intestine, eyes, and tonsils. I'm sorry, it's causes by eating those types that have the mad cow disease, and it can cause death and dementia. So important, very important to make sure that we're cooking foods and holding and storing them properly. So you just need to kind of understand that the common ones, their sources, symptoms, onset, duration. A lot of people, you can see onset time after consumption. Some happen more quickly, and some happen within, a few days of consuming the food. So how do we prevent it? Choose your food carefully. When in doubt, throw it out. I do not recommend keeping food forever, making sure you're dating your leftovers. Clean kitchens, very important. Store food in a refrigerator or freezer. Thaw in the refrigerator or freezer, and heat foods to recommended temperature. Safe grocery choices, buy from reputable vendors. Jars that are securely closed. Avoid cans that are rusted, dented, or bulging. Make sure packaging's secure. Don't let frozen foods thaw and then refreeze. Bad idea. Make sure your frozen foods are solidly frozen, and check your sell-by, best by, and your expiration dates on food. So, safe food handling, you're going to watch the movies this week, so it's very important that your hands, countertops, cutting boards, and utensils are washed with warm soapy water before each step in food preparation. And that foods that are going to be cooked should not be prepared on the same surface as foods that are eaten raw. Watch out for the danger zone. Cooked food should be held at 140 degrees or above, and refrigerated temperatures 40 degrees or below stops the growth of microorganisms. So keep your food out of this danger zone between 40 and 140 degrees. Cross-contamination is a big issue. It occurs when uncooked foods contact raw food surfaces. Cooked meat should never be returned to the same dish. So when you're barbecuing or cooking, sauces used to marinate uncooked food should never be used as a sauce on cooked food unless it's heated to 140 or above, or cooked with the meat. Refrigerate cooked food as soon as possible. Large portions divided into smaller portions so they cool quickly, and only keep leftovers for a few days. So, tracking foodborne illness, this was a diagram in the book. So this shows that 200 children enrolled at a local elementary school were either absent or went home sick sometime during the school day. They had symptoms including nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, and fever. The school suspected foodborne illness, and the local health department was notified, and they traced it to a spring celebration held at the school. And for this event, the first graders made cupcakes, the second graders made cookies, and the third graders made fruit salad, and the fourth graders made frozen custard. And all the children interviewed about which of these foods they had eaten that day, and this is how they came up with the graph. And so what they found is the stool samples of the children contained salmonella, and they determined that the frozen custard recipe included raw eggs that were contaminated with salmonella. So you see most of the children became ill, had the frozen custard. So what we know is that we need to be cautious. Picnics, I always say, like any kind of buffets, it all looks great, everybody's gathering, it's a warm and sunny day. But if you're concerned with foodborne illness, we need to think about how long that food is sitting out. And it won't take long before enough bacteria are present to cause foodborne illness. And cells multiply very rapidly. So things like egg salad or deviled eggs or protein foods where we typically associate foodborne illness, we need to be very cautious. Food should not be left out of the refrigerator for more than 2 hours or more than 1 hour if the temperatures are over 90 degrees. So think about how you're going to cool that food at a buffet, because see how quickly number of bacterial cells into the 1,000 after 2 hours. We really got an issue. Agricultural and industrial chemicals in food, a lot of discussion about this today. Chemicals are used in agricultural production, and industrial wastes can contaminate the environment and find our way into the food supply. We call this bioaccumulation, when these plants or animals are reaching higher concentrations at each level of the food chain. And then they eventually get to humans, and that is the cycle of it. Pesticides in food, they're good to prevent diseases and insects infestation. They can be applied before or after harvest, and they make food look prettier, produce especially. But it can be found in treated plants and in meat, poultry, fish, and dairy products, since it enters the water and soil. So the risks of this depend on the size, age, and health of the consumer and the type and amount consumed. The EPA, the FDA, and the USDA all monitor the types of pesticides, how much is used, the residue, and how these reach consumers to make sure that as minimal amounts as possible reach the consumers. So we know that domestic versus imported, we can see the difference in the amount of pesticides where either no residue was found, but levels were below, and residue exceeded tolerances, because it's not always monitored from imported foods as well, where they do sample those. What's integrated pest management? That's a pest control method using chemical and non-chemical methods, and emphasizes the use of natural toxins for pesticides, eliminating pests, limiting pesticide use, and they learn about the life cycles of the pests to manage the pests more economically with the least hazards to people, property, and the environment. So what about organic foods? Organic foods, what does that mean? And it typically refers to those foods produced, processed, and handled according to the USDA National Organic Program standards, and the goal is to reduce chemical pesticides and fertilizers. There's certain ones that can or cannot be used, and most conventional pesticides, synthetic food fertilizers, sewage sludge, or GMO ingredients, irradiation, and antibiotics and growth hormones are prohibited. The goal is recycling of resources, conservation of soil, water, and the USDA must certify them before they can label it organic. So you may have seen this before, 100% organic versus just organic, or made with organic ingredients. So you can see the varying degrees of how organic it is. So should you go organic? I really think that's an individual choice. I think as people become more and more concerned about food safety, nutritional health, and the environment, they turn to organic food, but I think you really need to do your research to find out if it's worth it for you. PCBs is a group of carcinogenic compounds. Prior to 1970s, PCBs were in the runoff from manufacturing plants. They're still in the environment. Fish, as we always hear about fish being contaminated with everything. Prenatal exposure and contaminated breast milk causes nervous system damage and learning deficits. They typically suggest pregnant women stay away from eating a lot of fish during pregnancy and lactation. Other contaminants, chlordane, used to control termites, radioactive substances, cadmium, can cause some kidney damage, lead, arsenic, mercury. All of these cells can cause damage to those populations that are at more immune risk. Antibiotics and hormones, most manufacturers only use hormones to improve the health of the animal. They try to prevent it from being passed to the consumers, and they're monitored for the amount of use in it. So there are some pros and cons in the use of it, and you really have to